everyone, this video tutorial is for the Brewster Belt Bag by Hills Handmade. As the name states, it is a belt bag. However, I know lots of people like to wear these types of bags across their chest or on their back, so they can wear it that way if they prefer, especially because there's a swivel hook. It'll make it easy for putting on and taking off. So let's discuss some of the features of this bag. So as you can see, first there is a flap that comes over the front of the bag. This flap would be great for adding a focal piece, so some embroidery, heat transfer vinyl, or even fussy cutting some fabric. When you open up the flap, there is a zipper top, and when you open that up, there is a slip pocket inside. So that's perfect for sliding your phone into. Fits nicely in there. I need a few extra hands, so phone fits nicely in there. And then you have lots of extra space here for your wallet, keys, anything that you want to carry with you. Then on the back of the bag is a zipper pocket, and this would be good for a smaller wallet so you could have it close to your body. You could even put your phone in there if it is small enough to fit in there. And then you have your strap, which is adjustable. So those are all the features of the Brewster Belt Bag, and I'm going to walk you through all the steps of making this bag, including sharing some tips and tricks along the way. So let's get started making our Brewster Belt Bags. So the very first thing you'll want to do is read through the entire pattern. There is always some information that the designer wants you to note before you get started. Once you've read through the entire pattern, you can go ahead and print your pattern pieces and then cut all your pattern pieces out of your fabric. So I have already gone ahead and done that. I've also fused interfacing where the interfacing is needed. For this tutorial, I am using a faux leather for my exterior. There is no interfacing on my faux leather, and I'm using the quilting cotton for my lining. I've also got my strapping cut. I've also cut my zippers to length because I've read through the pattern. I also know exactly what length they need to be cut. And I've also gone ahead and made markings where there are markings needed to be made, such as on the piece here. This is the backing, so the marking for where the flap needs to go, and I've cut my opening for my zipper. So if you've read through the pattern, you'll be able to go ahead and cut out your area for your zipper opening. If not, when we get to that step, you can simply just pause the video and cut it out there. And I've done all my center markings as well. Another thing I've done is I've marked what each pattern piece is with the corresponding letter. So this is piece A, and then I've marked that these are the exterior pocket pieces, just so I know when we get to those steps in the pattern, I'll know exactly which pattern piece I need to grab. So once you have everything cut, all your interfacing fused, all your markings made, all your pattern pieces labeled, we can get right to sewing. First thing you need will be your flap. So I have both my flaps cut from my exterior fabric. That's just a preference. I like to have them both the same so that when you look at the bag from the front, you see both, because sometimes you get a little bit of the lining sticking out the bottom. So that's just a personal preference. Having the lining sticking out can also make it look like piping, which is really nice. So first thing you need to do is you need to make a mark on one of your flap pieces for where your snap is going to go. Now, if you're using a magnetic snap, you'll go ahead and cut the slits now. I'm going to use a magnetic snap. And cutting the slits now will make it easier for installing it later. If you're using a turn lock or a twist lock or anything like that, you will install it later once the flap is all sewn together. If you're doing the magnetic snap, you'll go ahead and do this now. So I've used the measurement in the pattern to mark where my magnetic snap will go, and that's on your pattern piece, so you'll use that for marking where the magnetic snap will go. So all I did is I've cut my slits and I've just left it like that. So you're just going to cut your slits. Again, if you're using something like a flip lock or a twist lock or a snap or anything like that, you'll install it later. So a decorative snap, you'll install it once the flap is all constructed. So another thing to note is if you're using a non-fraying material, there's dotted lines on the pattern piece, and that's where you'll cut your material, is on the dotted line if you're using a non-fraying material. However, I'm using a non-fraying material, but I didn't cut mine on the dotted line just simply because I have this backing on my faux leather that kind of shows when it's left raw, and I don't really want that. And I know my machine can handle sewing through that, so I've cut it the full piece as if I'm doing this with quilting cotton, so I'm going to follow the instructions for using quilting cotton. But if you are using a material that doesn't fray, you will cut it on the dotted line, and if you're using quilting cotton for your lining, you'll cut it at the full piece. So I just wanted to note that. So if you're using quilting cotton, you're going to follow exactly what I'm doing right now. So there is a measurement that you need to make on the pattern piece here. So that's given in the pattern, and you'll want to make that mark, and then where that mark is, you can go ahead and use some double-sided tape and fold it down at that mark. So apply some double-sided tape at the top. And you'll do this on both pieces. Again, if you've used, your exterior is one that is from a non-fraying material, you would have cut it smaller, so you only have to do this if you're using a quilting cotton. And again, I'm doing this on this, even though it is a faux leather and it's a non-fraying material, it does have that black backing that kind of shows, and I'm not really crazy about it, so I just want a cleaner finish, and I know my machine can also handle it. So I'm just folding this down at that mark that I made. So there's one. And if you're using quilting cotton, you can also use a washable glue stick. So just one of these, you can purchase it at the dollar store, Walmart, Target, anywhere that sells washable glue sticks. I buy them at the dollar store just because they are the cheapest there. And you just use it instead of using double-sided tape. I like to use the washable glue stick wherever I can instead of double-sided tape, because double-sided tape is pretty expensive, and that just helps save a little bit of money. So if I was using quilting cotton for this, I would have just used the glue, and then I would have pressed it with my iron to dry it, because the glue will gum up your needle, so you want to make sure that that glue is dry before you sew it. If you're using glue on your faux leather or any of those kind of materials that you can't press with an iron, you'll have to wait till it dries before you sew it. So now we're going to take these two pieces and we're going to place them so that they are pretty sides touching. And we're going to line it up, so line up your top, line up your sides, and your bottom, so get everything all nicely lined up. And then we're going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. So I'm just clipping all the way around, getting everything all nicely lined up. And I even pinned the top. So we're not going to be sewing the top. Even though I'm pinning it, we're not sewing the top. We're just sewing the sides and the bottom. So just pin it all the way around. And then sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. And again, you're not sewing this top edge where you've pressed, or if you have this top edge raw, depending on your material, you're just sewing that top edge. And in corners, I like to backstitch. And the reason for this is it just adds a little bit of extra security when you go to poke out the corners and turn it out. I just feel like it adds that extra strength and you don't accidentally poke your tool that you're using to poke out your corners all the way through. You don't have to do that, that's just a little extra precautionary thing I do. You'll trim all your threads. And then we're going to trim our corners and the seam allowance. I'm going to trim my seam allowance first, then I'll trim my corners, and I'll turn them on an angle, sorry. So I'll show you what I mean. And be careful when you're cutting too that you don't snip into your stitches. Oops. So when I mean I trim them on an angle, so this is straight, and then I come in and I trim it, and I don't know if you can see that. So this here would be flat across here, and then I go up. And that just helps reduce the bulk in those corners for when we're turning this right sides out. So now we're going to turn this right sides out. And if you have a turning tool, it's very handy and helpful to use it now, especially if you're like me and using a material that you can't press. However, if you're using quilting cotton, excuse me, for your flap, you can go ahead and take this to your iron and press it. If you're using a magnetic snap, just to note, the magnetic snap will be on the lining side of your flap. So your flap, if you've cut your slits, the slits will be on the lining side. I'm going to use some clips to help hold everything in place, just to make top stitching a little bit easier. Again, if you're using quilting cotton, go ahead, take this to your iron and give it a really good press. Once we have this all pressed, we're going to top stitch the edges all the way around on the sides and the bottom again. Same thing as we did when we stitched the flap together. So you're leaving the top open for now, because if we're installing a magnetic snap, you need to be able to get in there to install your magnetic snap. So just the sides, the bottom, and the other side is all you're doing. So down one side, across the bottom, across the other side, and back up. And you'll want to use your stitch length that you like to use for top stitching. Trim all your threads. And that's how your flap is looking so far. Now, if you're installing a decorative snap, you'll go ahead and install the decorative snap at the measurement given in the pattern, and you'll want to put it through the exterior and lining pieces. But if you're installing a magnetic snap, you need your washer again. And 1/2 of your magnetic snap, so I have the male half. And a small scrap of interfacing. And you can use Decovil, Peltex, foam, so I'm just going to use some foam. And I'm actually going to trim it so it fits into where it's going. So you're going to push your magnetic snap through those slits you made. And this is going to be a bit tricky, so if you feel more comfortable, you can turn it so that it's almost wrong sides out, just like that. And see, that's why I trimmed my phone on that angle, because it would have been really tight getting in there and it would have caused a lot of bulk. So when I turn this back right sides out, it won't be all bulky. Hope that makes sense. Now I just use a pair of pliers to turn my prongs under or down. So I push my prongs in towards each other. And one more thing I do is add a piece of tape. And I just put this over the prongs. And this just helps the prongs from wearing through the material over time. So I'm just flattening it out in there, just making sure everything's flat. And that's how it looks with the magnetic snap. I know it's shiny, but you can see the magnetic snap there. So just make sure everything's pressed nice and flat. Now that we have our magnetic snap installed and the flap top stitched, the last thing we need to do is we need to stitch the top of our flap. So pin it. Make sure your top edges stay lined up. And then we're going to top stitch this top hole closed. Cut all your threads. And there we go. It looks just like that when it is top stitched. Put that to the side for now because we need to install the female half of our magnetic snap onto our exterior front piece. And I've marked that with an F so I know where it is. And I've also made my marking already, so there's a measurement given in the pattern for where you're going to place this. So just need to get that washer out of here. So same thing, install this per your manufacturer's instructions. So small scrap of foam. I'm going to make the marks for my slits. And if you're using quilting cotton for this, I do recommend putting a fray stop or fray check, some kind of seam sealant, to stop it from fraying before you install your magnetic snap. Just for a little extra security. You don't really need it on the non-fraying material because it won't fray. But definitely for the quilting cotton. You can even use it on canvas as well if you're worried about your canvas fraying. I've used it on canvas as well. Again, some duct tape over the prongs. And then that's how it looks. Just like that. So now we're going to move on. So I'm going to put these to the side. I'm going to leave them clipped because we now need our back. So using your pattern piece, as I mentioned previously, I've already gone ahead and cut my opening for my zipper. And I'm using, again, a non-fraying material, so I've went ahead and used the cutout for the non-fraying material, but if you're using the quilting cotton for your backing, you'll want to refer to the pattern for how to cut this out, because it's not the exact same. You're not just cutting a square, you're making the mark for the rectangle, drawing a line down the center of your rectangle, and cutting little slits. So you cut down the center and you cut V's here on each end, and then you're going to fold it and press it. So you'll want to refer to the pattern for that so that you have it cut out as per the material that you're using. So again, that's in the pattern. So once you have that cut out, you can put that to the side for now. Then you can grab your zipper pocket zipper, and I like to label my zippers when I cut them. So this says zipper pocket zipper, and that way there I know what zipper I need when I get to the steps in the pattern. Especially when you have a pattern that has a lot of zippers, sometimes it can get a little confusing, so that's very handy to have. So I've marked my zipper pocket pieces with exterior zipper pocket number 1 and number 2, and that's just because one of them is cut smaller than the other, and that's just to help me know which one I'm grabbing. So you're going to take your first zipper pocket piece and you're going to lay it right sides up. So this is the bigger piece of the zipper pockets that you've cut. You're going to lay it right side up. You're going to place the zipper tape right side up along the top edge of the zipper pocket piece. So the wrong side of the zipper will be against the pretty side of your lining fabric or your pocket fabric. And it does look like it's going to be a little bit backwards, but when you have the zipper pocket constructed and you open the zipper, this is where you're going to be seeing when you look into the pocket. If you've changed your stitch length to a top stitching length, don't forget to return it back to the stitch length you like to use for sewing your bags. Now we're going to baste this in place. Move your zipper out of the way when you approach it, and there's a reason for that, not only because you don't want to hit it, especially if you have a dangly pull like I have, but a zipper tape, when the zipper pull is in the way, kind of bumps where the zipper pull is, so that will help you flatten it and make it nice and straight as you're sewing and prevent any wavy zippers. Also, don't pull on your zipper as you're sewing it. You don't want to cause it to be wavy as well. Oops, I ran out of bobbin and didn't even realize it. So I'm going to go and fill up my bobbin and come back and we will continue on with sewing our zipper pocket. Alright, so my bobbin is filled. Now I can get back to basting the zipper in place. And again, same thing I was saying about the zipper pull, move it out of the way. Just be careful not to slide it off your zipper tape if you have it installed. She does have in the instructions that you don't have the zipper installed, the zipper pull. We install it after. However, I just leave mine on. But if you want, you can absolutely take your zipper pull off and install it later, whatever you're more comfortable with. So now we're going to take the remaining piece for your exterior pocket and you're going to lay it right sides up, and again you're going to place your zipper so it is wrong sides of the zipper against the pretty side of the lining, and you want to line everything up. So your exterior zipper pockets, you want to make sure they're lined up on the side. And you'll notice that my zipper is cut a little bit longer. I like to do that just in case, just to make sure everything will line up later. I like to have that little bit of extra wiggle room. So it's not cut much longer than what she's given in the pattern, but just long enough to give me that extra little bit of wiggle room. So now we're going to sew this as well, so baste this all in place. Moved my zipper pull out of the way. So now now you have a piece that will look like this once it's opened up. So I'm going to give this just a finger press to press this down. And that's how it looks. And as I was mentioning before, when you open up the zipper and your pocket is complete, you'll be looking down into the zipper pocket. You'll see the right side of the fabric. So the wrong side of your fabric ends up going against the exterior back. Excuse me. So now we need to take our backing and we need to take our zipper pocket, and we're going to place some double-sided tape onto our zipper. And if you haven't already, as I was mentioning, if you don't have your pull already attached, you can go ahead and put it on. So I'm putting some double-sided tape on my zipper. And I'm just putting it along the edge. So just to note, the top of the zipper pocket is going to be the piece that is bigger. So you want to make sure the bigger piece is at the top. Make sure you don't have it flipped the other way because you don't want the smaller piece on the bottom. So we're going to remove the backing of the double-sided tape. So again, bigger piece of the exterior pocket is on the top. And I'm going to center my zipper pocket opening over my zipper. And you want to make sure that you have an even amount on both sides. So I'm just going to move my zipper out of the way. And by even amount, I mean your fabric, your zipper pocket itself. You want to try and have that centered as well. There we go. So now we're going to top stitch the top and the bottom edges of the box, and I'm just going to clip this so that it stays out of my way as I'm sewing. And then this one too I'm going to clip. I just don't want it going under my needle and then my pocket being sewn down or wrong. So now we're just going to top stitch along the top edge and the bottom edge only, not the sides, so just the top and the bottom. And again, move your zipper pull out of the way. And a little tip, when you're sewing the top and bottom edges, we don't want any back stitching, and if you do, you're fine with back stitching, that's okay. But if you don't want back stitching, don't back stitch. Leave long tails on your machine, so leave long tails, start stitching, go all the way across, leave long tails at the end, cut them, and then we'll pull them through to the back and tie them off when we're done. Just be careful not to hit that zipper pull when you're passing it. So again, long tails. And I'm going to pull them through to the back, and all I do is take the back thread, pull it, and it creates a little loop, which is the front thread that comes up. And I just use the end of my scissors or my seam ripper to pull it through to the back. Now I'm just going to tie a few knots. Be careful how tight you're pulling the knots because you can break the thread. I've done it many times. So just tie a little knot. and then you'll cut these threads, and then you'll have no back stitching at all. And anywhere you want to do that, have no back stitching, that's the method you can use. And it's even helpful for, say, if you're sewing a strap and you run out of bobbin thread, like I did when I was basting my zipper to the exterior pocket. If you run out of bobbin thread on your strap as you're top stitching, you can just pick out a few stitches, go back and pick a few stitches out, then tie the threads, pull them through. So I would use a needle to pull it through the material, so out the sides, and that way there you see no knots, no nothing. It's a really handy method for that, because sometimes we do run out of bobbin thread at the wrong time. So again, long threads, pull it through to the back, tie it off. And if you're using a really busy material, back stitching won't be seen, so you can go ahead and back stitch. You won't see it as much. So if I was using a material that was really busy, I would have just back stitched. It wouldn't have bothered me because you wouldn't have seen it as much. Tie your threads off, and if you want, you can also add a bit of glue to where you've made those knots to make sure that they don't come undone if you really want to have some extra security there. So now I'm just removing my clips. That's how it's looking so far. So I've sewn the top and the bottom, and I haven't sewn the sides. So now we're going to flip the lining top pieces down, and we're going to sew the sides of the box, starting where your last stitch was and ending where the other last stitch was. So right up here at the top last stitch and ending on the bottom last stitch. And you're going to do that as well on this side, starting at the first stitch, the last stitch here, and the last stitch there. And to keep this pinned down, again, I'm going to add some clips, and we're going to do the same thing. Again, leave long threads or long tails. So starting where you stopped, so I just like to lean back and look and make sure with my presser foot still up that the needle is going into that stitch hole. And if you have to reduce your stitch length to get it to end in the same stitch hole where you ended before, shorten your stitch length. Again, long tails. Pull them all through to the back. And then I'm just going to tie them off. And then repeat that for the other side. So pull the threads to the back. And then you'll tie them off. trim your threads. That's how it's looking so far. Now my zipper is a bit longer, so I'm just going to trim it. Just because I don't want it to end up being in the seam allowance when we go to construct the bag. When we add our gusset. There we go. So that's how it's looking so far. So we've sewn the top and the sides and the bottom. So now we're going to sew the pocket together. And because there's double-sided tape here, it's sticking down. So now we're going to sew the sides and bottom all together of the pocket. And you'll want to sew this with your exterior facing up so that you can keep it out of the way as you're sewing past it. So with the exterior facing up, just pull it back and out of the way. And then sew your pocket sides and bottom. And in these corners I don't backstitch because I don't feel it's really necessary. It's just a pocket. We're not really pushing it out. And there we have it. We have installed our zipper pocket. I'm just going to cut these threads. And any of my threads that are... So you have a zipper pocket. When you look down into the bag, you'll see your zipper pocket. Now we need to draw a line on the back panel, and there's a measurement given in the pattern for where you need to draw that line. And I've already gone ahead and drawn that line. We're going to add some double-sided tape just along the top of the line, the width of the zipper. So you don't want to go past the zipper. And then we're going to place the flap at that line. Now your flap, you want it to be centered. So to find the center mark, just fold it in half and crease it. And to find the center mark of your backing, you can fold it and crease it as well. Just give it a little crease with your fingers. Now, when you're placing your flap on, the backing will be right side up. Your flap will be exterior side up. So the magnetic snap will be against your table. Line it up with that line, get it centered. Oops. So lining it up with that line. Once you feel like you have your flap lined up and centered exactly how you want it, we're going to stitch it in place. So far it's looking like that. So again, my backing is right side up and my exterior flap is facing up. so that the magnetic snap is against the table. So once you have that all centered on your back panel, we're going to stitch this using the seam allowance that is given in the pattern. And just make sure your pocket is down out of the way so that you're not stitching it up to where your flap is. Once you sew all the way across, trim your threads, and then you'll sew the second row of stitching at the measurement given in the pattern. And there you have it. That's how it's looking so far when we've stitched our flap to our back of our bag. So when we put the front on, it'll go over it like this. Now we need to keep this back lining, or this back exterior, and we need to grab our back lining. So one of our lining A pieces, and we're going to place it so that it is wrong sides touching, so the wrong sides are together, because this bag is done with binding, so everything is going to be wrong sides together right now. And one thing I'm going to do is within my seam allowance, I'm going to transfer my center marks onto the right side of my fabric, just within my seam allowance, just so when we're going to do the final construction of the bag, I know where my quarter markings are, or my half markings. You'll also want to line those up on the exterior and the lining as well. We're going to sew this all the way around. We're going to baste the exterior to the lining, and you want to sew with your exterior side up so that you can see where your flap is and you don't sew over the flap, and you'll be able to move it out of the way. So you're sewing with it up, the exterior up. And don't forget to push your flap out of the way. So because I've sewn across where the flap is, to prevent my lining and exterior from shifting, I'm now going to turn it over because I've already sewn across where the flap is. I'm out of the way of the flap, and I'm going to sew from the lining side, and I'm going to go all the way back to where I sewed on this side. And this will just help prevent shifting and keep everything nice and flat. to move that zipper out of the way because it's dangling and I don't want to hit it. And this is just because as you're sewing, things can shift, and this just prevents that shifting. Just like that. So when I started basting my exterior to my lining, I did it from this side, but I started right, oops, I'm trying to clip this thread and it won't let me. I started right where the flap starts here, and I went all the way down and around, and I stopped in the center. Then I came back, flipped it over, and started on the lining side, and I went all the way from where I started when I started stitching the exterior to the lining together, backstitched, went all the way around the curve, down this other curve, and stopped and backstitched when I reached there. And that just prevents the fabrics from shifting on each other, so they stay nice and flat. Another thing is make sure your pocket is in there nice and flat as well, and that it didn't shift on you and get under your stitching as you were sewing. So now you'll need to cut some webbing to a length given in the pattern. Once you have that cut, so you'll want to cut 2 pieces, you'll use your D-rings and you'll fold each piece of strapping over that D-ring or rectangle ring, whatever you've chosen to use, just like this. And my D-rings have this little bar here, so they may look a little bit different, but whatever you've chosen to use will work. So D-ring or rectangle ring or D-ring like mine. And just before I continue, I like to baste the end together just to keep everything together and nothing shifts on me. And I'm returning my stitch length back to the length I like to use for sewing. There we go. So I've done that, so it looks like this. This isn't part of the pattern what I just did, but I just like to do that just to make sure everything stays in place and nothing shifts on me. So now you'll need to take these 2 strap anchor pieces. There'll be 4, so there'll be 2 that are mirrored. And you'll place your webbing and your strapping on the short edge facing inwards. So I'm going to move these out of the way. So you have the piece that looks like this, and you have one edge that's longer and one edge that's shorter. You're going to place it on the edge that's shorter. So the D-ring will be facing in towards that longer edge. So here's the longer edge. And there's a measurement that she gives in the pattern for how far over the webbing will hang. So you'll want to refer to that. So I'm just measuring to make sure. Pin it in place, and then you'll baste it in place. And you'll want to do this for both pieces. So we need to make sure we have ones that can be mirrored, because they'll be sewn together after to be mirrored. So you're doing it on the pieces that will look the same. And you want this to be centered as well, so make sure you have it centered. So centered on your strap anchor piece. And then stitch it in place. Now it looks like this, so you have the 2 of the strap anchors with the D-ring attached. So again, the D-ring is facing towards the longer side. Now you're going to take the mirrored strap anchor piece and place it pretty sides touching, so you have the D-ring sandwiched in the middle. You're going to pin it all the way around. Do that for the second one as well. And then we're going to sew the edge, hang on. So we're going to sew the top edge, the edge where your D-ring is, or your webbing is, and then down the other edge. We're going to leave that long edge open. Do not sew that. You're just sewing the 3 sides. So you'll sew them using the seam allowance given in the pattern. So you're not sewing the edge that's opposite the D-ring. And again, in those corners, I like to backstitch. That's how it looks. So I've sewn one side across the top, down the edge with the webbing and D-ring, and then down the other side. So the long edge is not sewn. I'm going to repeat that for the second one. And just be careful when you're sewing by the D-ring. It is a little bit close. You don't want to hit it. Now we need to trim the corners. Don't trim your webbing. Leave the webbing long. So now we need to turn them right sides out, and I'm just going to trim down this seam here. Just to make sure I've reduced the bulk. So I'm turning it right sides out. And because I used a faux leather or vinyl, it's going to be a little bit trickier, but not impossible. It's a lot easier than I thought it would be, actually. Push out your corners gently. All pushed out. And again, if you've used a material that you can press, you can take this to your iron and press it. I haven't, so I'm going to use some clips just to help hold everything in place. Turn this one right sides out. So again, it can be a bit tricky depending on the material you're using, but I'm kind of surprised at how easy that one was. So when you're turning it, if you just kind of push where the webbing is, where your D-ring is, it helps push it out a little bit easier. pins, or clips, sorry, if you can, go to your iron and give this a press. Get it all nice and flat. And then we're going to top stitch around all the edges. So we're going to top stitch around all the edges. And I'm going to go across the open edge as well, just to hold it together. So that's how the one looks when it's stitched. Now I'm going to repeat that for the second one. Again, across that bottom edge. So the two of them are now done. We have them both stitched and they're just like that. Now we need to take the back So first I'm going to open up my zipper, and we need to take the back and lay our strap anchors on top of the backing. So you're going to line up this raw edge with the raw side edge of your back, and you're going to line it up with the top stitching on your flap. So remember we did 2 rows of stitching? You're lining it up with the top one. Pin it in place. And then repeat that for the other side. And when you're laying them on the back panel, you want it to be angled. So they're angled. So see how it angles down here and one side's flat? The flat side of the strap anchor is at the top. So again, lining it up with the top stitching on the flap, pin it in place. And then you're going to baste these. I'm just going to make sure. Then you're going to baste the sides of these strap anchors to your back panel. And they look just like that. And I've moved my zipper out of the way, as I mentioned, just to keep it so that it doesn't get caught up in any stitching where when I go to attach even the gusset or when I've attached these. And I'm going to leave it like that just to keep it out of the way because it is dangly. We're going to set this to the side and move on to making our slip pocket. So we need our slip pocket pieces. And for mine, I just wrote slip pocket on them, so slip, so I knew what they were. Now, if you're using waterproof canvas, there's a different instruction for waterproof canvas, so I'm just going to run you through what you're going to do. So there is a measurement in the pattern that you need to make down from the top. Once you've made that mark, you'll then fold it at that line down and press. We're using cotton, so what we're going to do is lay the 2 slip pocket pieces right sides together and sew across the top edge using the measurement given in the pattern. So I'm going to sew across the top, and if you've changed your stitch length to be longer for top stitching, you'll want to return it back to your stitch length. We're going to turn this so it is going to be right sides together, or wrong sides together, sorry. But I'm going to go to my iron first and I'm going to press this. So I'm going to go do that, and then I'll come back and we will continue on with making our slip pocket. So now that I have my slip pocket all pressed, I'm going to top stitch across the top edge. Now we need to take our slip pocket and place it with right sides together with our lining A piece. So the lining side of the slip pocket will be against the right side of lining A piece. So you're going to line it up, clip it in place, and if you want, you can attach a logo onto your lining, just as Hillary did for hers, if you want here as well. You can attach it above the slip pocket. So for this, I'm going to start sewing on the bottom of the slip pocket here in the center, and I'm going to sew all the way across the bottom and up the one side, back stitch. Then I'm going to come back over here and repeat that for this side. And again, that just helps prevent this from shifting around on me while I'm sewing. So that's how it looks. The slip pocket is done. And again, if you want, you can add your logo right here in the center on your lining panel. So now we're going to place the interior lining wrong sides together with the front panel. And I have it marked with the T. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did previously. Oops. I'm going to transfer my center marks just within the seam allowance so that I know where they are when we're attaching the gusset. So again, right sides together, and I'll do the exact same thing I did before when sewing so that nothing shifts on me. It all the way around. And I want to make sure it's flat. So I'm going to unpin it because for some reason my exterior is sort of puffing up. And I don't want that. So again, I'm going to start in the center, sew all the way around, coming back up to the center. So starting at the bottom center, go around the bottom, up the side, and stopping at the center. I'll back stitch, then I'll flip it over, and I will do that on the other side. And again, that just prevents the materials from shifting on me. And for our basting stitch, you can use a longer stitch length. It doesn't have to be your stitch length you use when you're sewing your bag together. There we have it. Our lining is attached to our exterior. And remember, when you're attaching it, you want to make sure you attach it so the top is at the top. And that's why I had marked a T on my exterior so I knew where the top was. And that's very important because of your magnetic snap. So now we're going to move on with making our zipper panel. So we need our exterior zipper panel pieces, our lining zipper panel, and our zipper. If you haven't already, you'll want to make the center marks on your exterior and lining zipper panels. I've already gone ahead and done that. Then you're going to take your exterior zipper panel, place it so it is facing right sides up, and then place your zipper so it is right sides together with the exterior zipper panel, and pin it in place. Now you can use some double-sided tape here to help hold this in place. However, I'm going to pin this in place, and then I'm going to baste my zipper to my exterior rather than using basting tape. She does have you do the exterior, pin it like this, and then pin the lining and then sew it. But just to make sure my exterior and my zipper don't shift when I'm sewing the lining to it, I'm going to baste it in place. There we go. I've basted that in place, so that will help ensure that nothing will shift on me. So now I'm going to take one of my lining zipper panel pieces and I'm going to place it so it is pretty sides against the wrong side of the zipper. Pin it in place. So I like to pin the ends first, pin the center as well so that they are together. And then pin the rest of the way. And then once we have this all pinned, we're going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. So I'm going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. So now we're going to turn these so they are wrong sides together. And I'm just going to add some clips. And if you have used quilting cotton, you can take this to your iron and give it a press. I'm also going to transfer that mark for the lining just in the seam allowance again. So I have my center marks visible when we go to construct the bag. So now we need to top stitch all 4 edges. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm doing the same thing I did for my exterior when I attached the exterior and lining A panel, just to help prevent things from shifting on me. So what I did was I top stitched down this side, down across the edge closest to the zipper, then down the one side, then I flipped it over and I stitched down the side and around the bottom edge. And this is just because I've noticed when I've done this kind of stitching before, top stitching around all 4 sides, that I do get fabric shifting on me. So I like to do that now just to prevent anything from shifting around on me. Now we're going to repeat that whole process for the remaining lining and exterior zipper panels. So again, place them so they are, the exterior and zipper are right sides together. And you'll want to make sure that, excuse me, that your exterior line up on these side edges as well, because mine did kind of shift on me in my zipper. It didn't stay, when I was pinning it, didn't stay centered as nicely as I would want it to. So again, making sure the side edges of your zipper panels line up. My zipper pull is stuck. There we go. And then clip the rest of the way. Actually, I guess it was centered. My mistake. It's just the way the tape was cut, it's not cut straight. So baste this down. Again, she does do it where you put the lining and exterior together. I'm doing it this way so I don't have to use double-sided tape. Excuse me. And I'm approaching where my zipper is, so I'm just going to slide it out of the way now. Be careful when you're sliding your zipper pull out of the way that you don't slide it off your zipper tape. One thing you can do to help prevent this, which I think I'm going to do now, is backstitch on the end of the zipper. Excuse me. And that creates a bar tack so that you don't slide your zipper pull off your tape. I'm just going to take a drink. I just needed a drink of coffee. So now I have the exterior attached to the zipper. I'm going to repeat that for the lining. Pin the center, pin the sides. Again, stitch this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. we're going to turn these so they are wrong sides together, or right sides out. Same thing, transferring my center mark within the seam allowances where I've marked it. Line up everything, and again, if you've used quilting cotton, you can take this to your iron. Because I've used this faux leather, I'm pinning it to hold it all in place. So now I'm going to top stitch the one edge, so the edge closest to the zipper and down the one side, then I'll flip it over and I'll top stitch the other side. Trim all your threads, and I always say trim all your threads because you don't want them coming and poking through later on, so it's just best to trim them now and then you don't have to worry about them later. You don't want them poking through your seams or anything else. And that's how your zipper panel is looking for now. If you don't have your zipper pull attached, go ahead and attach your zipper pull now. Now we're going to take our gusset, both the exterior and the lining, and again I'm going to transfer my marks just within the seam allowance. And we're going to place the zipper panel right sides up, and you're going to lay your gusset right sides against the right side of the exterior. So both exteriors are right sides together. Pin it in place. Now I'm going to baste this in place just before I attach my lining. This just helps ensure it doesn't shift on me. It's also extra stitching for strength too, I find. So now I'm going to take my lining, so that's what it looks like. Sorry, I was just about to say that. That's what it looks like. I forgot to trim a thread. Right now I basted my exterior right sides together with the exterior zipper panel. Now I'm going to flip this over so I'm looking at the lining. The lining is now facing up. I'm going to take my lining gusset and place it right sides together with the lining side of the zipper panel. And I'm going to clip it in place. And then we're going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. So as you can see, we've created a zipper or a zipper panel sandwich with our gusset and our zippers. So you'll want to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. So now we need to take these zipper panels and we need to turn them so that they are wrong sides together. And then we're going to top stitch across the gusset. So if you've used quilting cotton for both pieces, you can go ahead and press this. I haven't, so I need to do this without pressing. So just lay it flat. And we're going to top stitch across the gusset. So you're pulling it away from the zipper panel, just like that. So you have a piece right now that's looking like that. So now we're going to repeat that whole process for the other side. So again, take your exterior, place it right sides together with the right side of the zipper panel. Baste it in place. Make sure your zipper is zipped up out of the way so that you don't hit it. Now we're going to take the lining and place it right sides together with the lining side of the zipper panel, and you're going to have it looking like this. It'll all work out when we flip it. Then you'll sew this with the seam allowance that was given in the pattern. Cut your threads. So I didn't cut my threads from the first one. I'm just going to trim it as well. Now we're going to turn this, and you're going to have a circle, a little tube. So now when you top stitch, you want to have that tube so it is lining side against the bed of your machine, and you want to press this again, and we're going to top stitch on the gusset. And you have a piece that looks like this right now, a circle. So now we need to baste down these edges here along the sides. We've already basted the zipper gusset, but we need to baste the gusset together. So what we're going to do is I'm going to line up my center marks, and I'm going to add a lot of pins to prevent anything from shifting. And see, when I pull it tight, it makes everything all flat. So you can do that as you're pinning, just to make sure everything stays nice and flat and lined up. Lots of clips. And I'm going to do the same thing as I did previously with the zipper panel. So halfway, stop, break my stitches and flip, and sew the other way. And that'll just prevent, again, anything from shifting. And what's really exciting is we're almost done making this bag. It's a really quick sew. And you get this beautiful bag in the end, which is awesome. So now that I have it pinned, and again, lots of pins will help hold everything in place, I'm going to sew on one side, go to the halfway mark, stop, backstitch, then stop, break my stitches, and then come back and sew the other way, and that'll just prevent anything from shifting on me. And for basting, you can actually use a longer stitch length. So one side complete. Now I'm going to sew the other side. I'll go back and cut all my threads when I'm done. my threads are being trimmed. I'm just making sure I get them all, including any fraying that's happened. There we go. So there it is. You have a tube. This is your gusset now, your zipper panel and your gusset. So now we're going to attach this gusset to the front and back panels using your center markings to line it all up. So I'm going to start with the back panel just because this is going to be the one that might give us a little bit more problems because you have the flap to move out of the way and keep that there. So start with lining up your center mark at the top of your gusset with the center mark on the top of your back panel. Pin there. So the gusset is going right sides together with the right side or the exterior side of the back panel. So exteriors are touching. You can also open your zipper a little bit and pin your D-rings. I'll show you once I have it done. So that they're like this, so that they stay out of the way. And I've brought my flap up and out of the way of the gusset. And this is where it's going to be a little bit tricky, so you may need to switch to a zipper foot. And the bottom of the gusset here, where your gusset, the bottom of the gusset and the zipper panel meet, that's going to line up with the bottom of your strap anchor. You don't want them to overlap because that creates a lot of bulk. So you want to make sure that the strap anchor and the gusset seam are underneath. So the gusset is underneath that strap anchor. And when you're pinning, that flap will be in the way, so you'll just keep shifting it out of the way. Just be careful not to pull too hard. You don't want to rip any of your stitches or pull it off. And you're just going to keep pinning all the way around. You'll notice I'm using lots of clips. That's because I don't want anything shifting on me. Just going to repin this corner. So again, the gusset seam will be underneath your strap anchors. Lots of clips. And what I like to do is make snips in these curves just within the seam allowance. So you'll want to make note of what the seam allowance is, and then you can make snips within the curves. And that'll help open up the curve so that it can ease in easier. So you can do this while you're sewing, or you can do it before you start sewing. So I'm going to do it now. And that'll just help you get a nicer curve. All right, last snip. We'll make sure, yeah. So again, you may find it easier to sew with a zipper foot, so I'm going to switch to a zipper foot because that'll help me get an accurate seam allowance and get close. Because that flap is in the way, it's going to give you some, wrong foot, some bulk there to try and get around. So if you use a zipper foot, that'll make it a little bit easier because you can get as close as you can without hitting that flap, especially when you're coming around this curve. So now we're going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. And I'm going to start at the top because I find that that's the hardest. Actually, I'll start on the side and I'll come around and do the top just because that's going to be the hardest part to sew. And I kind of like to get it over with. And I'm also going to get my extension table. So I'm going to go put my extension table on and come back and we'll continue with sewing this. Alright, so I have my extension table. That's just going to make it easier for me to hold my bag up while I'm sewing. And again, I'm going to start on the side, come around and do across the flap first, just because I find that that is a little bit more challenging and I will need to go a lot slower. Also, return your stitch length back to the stitch length you use when you're stitching structural seams. And here I'm coming close to where the flap is, so I'm just moving everything out of the way. Another thing, I don't really like to remove my clips that I have in place until I'm as close as I can be to them, or even when my presser foot is touching them. Just on the curves mostly. Again, I'm where the flap is on that corner on the curve. And now that that's done, it's just easier to sew because I'm not worrying about moving that flap out of the way. Well, this part of the flap is being moved out of the way, but at the top. Again, I started on the side, went around, did at the top first, just because that's a little bit more challenging and I like to get that out of the way. Check to make sure your seams are all good. So just turn it, make sure you have no puckering or pleats. If you do, you can always unpick those stitches where it is. Look good. So that's what it's looking like so far. So now we're going to do that to attach the front panel. So we're going to repeat it, and make sure your front panel is right sides up. So I'm just going to move my table out of the way for a moment. So this is the top of the bag. This is the top of my panel, and I know that because of the way the slip pocket is. So again, pin it, lining up those quarter markings. Threads I need to cut here. And I'll do the same thing. I'll snip the curves just to help it ease in. And this side is going to be a little bit easier because we're not dealing with the flap. So again, snipping into those seams, just in the seam allowance. And again, you can do this while you're sewing, while it's right on the bed of your machine as you're approaching it. I just like to do this now to get it over with. Just makes it a little bit easier. And start sewing, and it doesn't matter where you start for this one because it's all going to be the same. Just make sure as you're coming to those curves, you can feel and make sure that there's no pleating happening. So I'm just going to reach my hand in and make sure it's nice and flat. maybe I lied. Maybe this is a little bit harder because you have the other side already attached. So you're trying to maneuver everything around. Now I'm going to take it and I'm just going to look to make sure that I have no pleats, because if there are any pleats, you can easily unpick that area and just re-stitch it. So I have one here that I don't really like the look of, so what I'm going to do is turn it back inside out, and I'm going to unpick the stitches there, and I'm just going to flatten it out. So to do that, I just unpick the stitches, where the pleat is, and just beyond, so I go past the pleat, before the pleat and past the pleat. And you want to make sure that you don't have any threads sticking out, so if there's any threads poking through, pull them through to the lining side and cut them. So you'll use some clips, you'll smooth it all out, and then you'll re-sew it. So what you'll do is you'll back stitch over the previous stitches, and then when you stop, you'll back stitch over the previous stitches. So that'll lock in those previous stitches you unstitched. So just like that. And for some reason that pleat doesn't want to go away, so we're going to have to be okay with it. I'm going to try one more time. So do the same thing, unpick my stitches. That pleat's driving me nuts. more time, see if I can get rid of it. There we go, I got rid of it. So that's how I get rid of pleats, if there's any pleats that I don't like. Turn everything right sides out, just check everything, so make sure that you don't have pleats anywhere else that you don't like. And I see one on my exterior, so on my back. So I'm gonna go do the same thing, unpick a few stitches, flatten it out, and then come back and we will continue with finishing our bag. All we need to do is attach our strap and bind the bag. So I'm going to go do that, come back, do the pleats, fixing those, and come back and we will continue on. Alright, so I have gone ahead and removed all the pleats in my bag and I'm quite happy with how it looks. Now we need to trim the corners. And she has a measurement in the pattern for how much you're trimming them. Careful not to cut your stitches. Another thing you can do if you have any stray threads or fraying from your lining, you can go ahead and cut those threads as well. Now we need to bind our bag, and there's a couple of different methods that you can use for doing this. I have a tutorial on my YouTube channel which I will link to below. So she uses canvas. I'm using a binding that I have made myself to match my bag. And first what I'm going to do is use double-sided tape to stick it to one side, and I'm just trimming where my lining is a little bit longer. And I know I like to sew this bag with the lining against the bed of my machine. So first I'll stick down that side. And I'm using some double-sided tape, and this is the process that I find is the easiest for me when I'm doing binding, but you can use your favorite method. Also very helpful to use a thread that matches the color of your binding. And keep in mind, nobody's really going to see this because it is inside your bag and it's tucked up in the seam here, and it acts as a skeleton for your bag. So it helps give it some structure as well, but nobody's really going to be looking at your binding, so don't worry if it's not 100% perfect or 100% stitched nicely. Trust me, mine is never 100% perfect. I have learned that I need to just try not to keep getting it perfect because it just makes me more frustrated. So with your binding, so this is the binding I'm using, you're going to place it so that it covers your seam at the top, so going all the way around. And the double-sided tape is helping hold it in place for me while I'm going all the way around. So this is a double fold bias tape. That's how I made it. You can buy them pre-packaged, or you can make it like I did, or you can even use canvas like Hillary has in the pattern, and then you just leave it so that it has the raw edges, or even fold over elastic works as well. I was wondering when my girl buddy was going to make an appearance. Hi, buddy. Hi. So the beginning one, I'm going to fold it so that the raw edge is tucked under. And I'm just finger pressing it. So continue attaching it all the way around. My binding is not sticking very well. It's not staying folded. I probably didn't press it long enough with my iron. My chair is squeaking. And then I'm just trimming that. And again, folding it over so that I have no raw edges. And then I'm going to use a bit of double-sided tape to hold it in place. And now we have to stick this to the other side. So flip this over and using some double-sided tape again, pull it over to the other side and tape it down. Again, this is the method I find makes the easiest for me. It does use up a lot of double-sided tape, but it also helps ensure that nothing shifts on me while I am sewing my binding to my bag. Whatever method you're comfortable with and doing, please use your method. I will admit I wasn't a fan of binding for a very long time, and now that I've done binding many times, excuse me, it has gotten much easier on me. And I actually like how it looks too, because it gives, like I said, that structure, like a skeleton. And I also like making my own binding so that I can have it match, my lining fabric perfectly. Makes it a little less noticeable. And I'm just tucking this one now under. It's not working out. Double-sided tape. Okay, so now we're ready to sew because it's all held together right now with the double-sided tape. You can use some clips if you want to help hold it in place, just to make sure nothing shifts on you. We're just sewing our binding in place. If you have a stiletto, you can use a stiletto. It'll be very helpful. Your threads. And another thing I like to do is I just like to make sure that it caught all the way around, that nothing shifted on me, and it did. And again, my binding isn't always 100%, and I'm okay with that because once you turn it out, it's not going to be seen. So now I'm going to repeat that whole process for the second side. So I'm going to go off camera and repeat that for the second side to attach my binding, and then I'll come back and we will finish the rest of the bag. Alright, so I've added my binding to the last side of my bag, and I've pinned the one side. This is just going to help give it some shape. So I've done that on the one side, but I didn't do it on the back side because we need to attach our strap still. So with your strap, there is a length you need to cut it, so you'll want to refer to the pattern for that. We're going to loop it around one end of the D-ring or your rectangle ring and fold it back onto itself. So just fold it back, and then you'll sew a box around this, getting as close to the hardware as you can. And I'm just trying to get this folded and for it to stay nice and neat. So we'll sew this, and I'm going to put back on my zipper foot. I changed my foot out thinking I didn't need it, but I do. And I still need my extension table too. I put everything away thinking it wasn't needed anymore, but it is. So we're going to sew this in place, sewing a box. I like to back stitch, extra security. I've just stitched a box. I'm cutting all my threads now. And now we're going to take this. So when I stitched my box, I made sure it was going to be where the back was, so it would be against your body when you wear it. Now we need to take this and make sure that our strap is flat and not twisted. So make sure it's flat. And you're going to slide the slider on. So up over that middle bar, just like that. And then you're going to slide your swivel hook on. So to do that, you just hold it in your hand. So I hold the hook part in my hand and I put the webbing through the loop of the swivel hook. And that way there it'll make sure it's on the correct way when we attach it to the bag. I'm just going to remove it from the bag. Now we need to take this loose end and feed it up through the slider. So I like to give a little bit of slack on what's already through the slider. So going up, so I'm holding the slider like this. So up against the side that's already attached to the D-ring. And then back down over the middle bar. Again, fold it onto itself. And then once I have this done, I like to just test it and see and make sure nothing's twisted, and I pull on it to make sure it stays tight, which it does. And then for this, I don't need my extension table. I'll be able to sew it just like this. Again, back stitch. Just hold on to your swivel hook so that it doesn't get caught under your needle or under your presser foot. Rivets instead, or Chicago screws if you prefer, and in that box you can also sew an X if you want. So there it is. We have our belt attached. So now I'm going to clip the rest of the bag, and I'll leave it sit for a little bit, and then I'll come back and show you how it looks. And you will get teeth marks. You will get teeth marks from your clips. So to get rid of those, what you do is heat up your ironing board with your iron and then just rub this over the spot or press it, and then sort of just with your hand say this was where it was. I just do this, and that sort of rubs out the teeth marks. So that's what you'll do to get rid of those. And up here it's going to be a little bit tricky to clip because that flap again, it's a bugger. So I'm not going to be able to really pin up there, but I am going to be able to pin at the bottom. So I'm going to pin all the way around. I'm going to open my zipper so I can push up that bottom corner. I've broke another clip. Many clips were harmed in the making of this bag. Got some threads that are poking out. This is a good time to check for that so you can trim those. So once I'm done clipping this, I'll pause the camera, I'll leave it clipped for a little bit, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how it looks once it's all pressed and completed. So that's what it looks like so far. I'm going to pause the camera, leave it, and take it all off when I come back. Before I come back, give it a good pressing with the iron so to get out the teeth marks, and then I'll show you how it looks. So I've removed all my clips and pressed my bag, removing all the teeth marks all the way around on the sides and the front and back. And to do that, I'll just demonstrate what I do really quick. So I heat up the ironing board, just a spot on my ironing board with my iron. Then I take my bag and I place it on top of that hot spot, and with my hand inside the bag, I just run my hand back and forth, paying special attention to where the teeth marks are, so close to the edge. And I just go back and forth and remove those teeth marks. And what that does with the heated ironing board, it heats up the vinyl, and when you're running your hands back and forth, you're smoothing out those teeth marks. And I'll do that all around the bag, both front and back. Depending on the material you're using, you may need to do this a few times just to get those teeth marks out. I also went ahead and added some rivets to the strap anchors as well to the belt. I just wanted them there for a little bit of extra decoration because I did use a solid, even though it's shimmery, a solid faux leather. So there is our Brewster bag. We're ready to take it out and show it off to the world. Before you do that, don't forget to take lots of pictures and share them on social media. While you're sharing them on social media, don't forget to use the hashtags that are in the pattern so we can easily find all your Brewster belt bags and everyone can admire them with you. I hope you enjoyed sewing along with me and maybe picked up a few tips and tricks along the way. Thank you for sewing with me. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.